Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is the murder of Lauren Giddings. Now, have you ever felt like when you walk in the streets you're being watched? The strange thing is that you could actually be being stalked and never know about it, and that's exactly what happened to Lauren. I'd just like to let you know I mean no disrespect to anyone I want to talk about today. I've just gathered this information off the internet and compiled it into a video for educational purposes. Lauren Giddings was born on the 18th of April in 1985 to parents Karen and William Giddings. She had two sisters and they were born in Tomoka Park in Maryland in the US. She was a really bright, successful 27-year-old woman. She was described as being very pretty. She had really strong morals and she was very career driven, so she knew exactly what she wanted and she would just go for it. She was also really friendly and she made people feel appreciated around her. She never really made people feel bad about themselves or anything like that. Like, if you think someone's strange, you may want to avoid them. She wasn't really like that. Yes, she may have thought somebody was strange, but she kind of just tried to put in an effort to make them feel liked or just be polite to them. That's just the kind of person that she was. Lauren would move to Macon in Georgia in 2008 because she wanted to study law. So she was accepted into Mercer Law University School, where again she would go on to study law. She was hoping to become a defense attorney. Lauren was a very happy social woman. She had a lot of friends and she would always keep in contact with them. Not only that, she was very family orientated. Her family meant absolutely everything to her. And if she wasn't making arrangements to go and see them, because again, she moved because of her career, but her heart was still back with her family. So if she wasn't making arrangements to go and see them, to talk to them, to whatever, they were making arrangements to come and see her. Lauren would also love to keep fit, so she would be seen often going jogging around her apartment, and she enjoyed keeping active. She would take her dog out for walks, and as well as keeping active, as I said, she was very career driven, so she would often go and do study sessions in the library because she was really serious about her career. She wanted to do well, and so she would go to every study session she could and just study as much as she could to get good grades, to do what she wanted and be successful in her career. She was a very passionate woman, and she was also involved in this group who actually worked to prevent convicts from receiving the death penalty. She was very against capital punishment. She thought it was immoral, unethical, and she just tried everything that she could to try and get these inmates off the death penalty. And again, she was very passionate about that. So in May of 2011, her life was going absolutely fantastically. She was doing really well. She was really close to graduating and doing like her final exams. She had a long-time boyfriend called David Van Diver, and it was a serious relationship that they were having together. He was a corporate lawyer that was living in Atlanta at the time, and he was actually planning on proposing to her. So that's how serious their relationship was. Her main goal though was her career. Obviously, she cared for David, you know, she wanted to be with him, but at that moment in time, that was her main focus. She lived in student housing alone across the street from school, and she had mentioned more than once that she kind of noticed some items had been moved in her house. She had a busy life and she studied all the time, and she was a very busy woman, and so she just kind of shrugged it off as being strange but not really important, as a lot of people would. I myself have left something somewhere and then forgot about it, or maybe I thought I put it somewhere and I put it somewhere else and really assumed that it definitely wasn't me that put it there, but it must have been. And so you just kind of shrug things like that off, and that's exactly what she did. She thought it was strange, it was a bit creepy, but I don't know, maybe she'd forgotten, maybe she had placed it there. You never really assume that somebody else has actually moved it, and that is the freakiest thing. At the end of June in 2011, she told her friends and her family that she was having this massive study session. She wanted to solely concentrate on her studying because there was a bar exam coming up and she wanted to close herself off to the world in a sense. And she often did that, so it wasn't abnormal, but pretty much telling them that if she didn't answer, then that was why. It would be the 25th of June was the last time that any one of her closest friends or her family would ever see her again. There was one man that would see her though, and that man was Stephen McDaniel. He was her next door neighbour and her classmate. And this is where the story just gets very, very disturbing. So Stephen was a 25-year-old guy. He was a bit of a nerd. He was antisocial. He liked playing video games and reading things like medieval fantasy books, and he seemingly really didn't have any friends. He actually aimed to become a criminal defense attorney, and so was attending the same school as Lauren. Okay, this is where the alarm bells start to ring, because Stephen used to live with a roommate once over, a few times over, I'm not sure, and this roommate actually came forward to say that he would talk about how to commit the perfect murder, and that was pretty much every night, which is weird. People should not be talking about that kind of stuff. I mean, sometimes you joke like, yes, okay, maybe I could get away with it or whatever, but you don't continuously talk about it all the time. Nobody does that unless you are a murderer, I guess, or you've got it in your head that you're gonna be one. I mean, even murderers don't talk about it, to be honest. If you're gonna go out and murder someone, it's highly unlikely that you're gonna be talking to people about it beforehand. Either way, he went on to say that if he did commit a murder, how he would get away with it. It was said that it was a power play for him, that maybe if you would look at him, you would think that he was weak, but he actually had one of the smartest minds that this person had ever seen. Now, this student didn't feel unsafe in their home, but he did eventually move across the road into student housing, across the road from the school. And that was where he met Lauren. Even though most people thought he was weird and didn't really like him, wouldn't engage him, and just avoided him like the plague, essentially, she wasn't that kind of person. Yes, she may have thought he was a bit creepy or a bit strange, but she was polite to him and she was friendly to him to a sense, to a degree, because she never wanted anybody to feel bad about themselves. And so, again, that was just the kind of person she was. And maybe that was what made him focus on her. Who knows? But it seems that he had feelings for her, which she didn't return. He had actually previously asked Lauren out on a date a few times, I believe, but she declined him. She had a boyfriend. So as I said, she told friends and family that she's studying for this exam. Several days later, when nobody had heard anything of her at all, people began to worry. Her friends started to notice that she'd not shown up for classes, she'd not shown up for study sessions, which that was her whole point of going off the grid, was so that she could study. And she never missed these. She was so focused on her career, she wouldn't have missed them. So rightly so, they were worried and they kept trying to ring her, text her, contact her in any way possible, and they received no response. They started to become concerned that something really bad had happened to her. Her friends went over to her apartment, knocked on the door, there was no answer, but there was no signs of a break-in or anything like that. And then one friend decided to call Lauren's sister, and that got her worried too, because Lauren's sister had actually texted her, but it wasn't urgent or anything like that. And so when she didn't receive a response, knowing that Lauren was studying and cramming for this exam, she didn't think much of it. But not now, learning that her friends had not seen her, who would have been around her, that she was missing the study sessions, which was the whole purpose of doing this, she got worried herself. So she puts down the phone, she tries to call Lauren and contact her, and she's not successful. She then went on to call Lauren's boyfriend, she went on to call hospitals and obviously informed the other family members, and everyone was really worried. That was when she had an idea. She called up the group of friends again and told them where Lauren's spare key was. It was hidden in a flower pot, and she asked them to take the key, to unlock the apartment, to go inside and have a look around and see whether anything looked out of place, to see whether Lauren was in there, because maybe she had collapsed and maybe she couldn't get any help. Maybe she was in there. So they did. Now this all caught the attention of Stephen, because he then came over, was wondering what was going on, and actually joined the group inside to look for Lauren. Nobody noticed anything wrong in the apartment. Nothing looked out of place. It didn't look like there had been any struggle or anything like that. There was no sign of forced entry. The apartment was locked up, and it was weird because Lauren wasn't there, but things that Lauren would normally take with her were. So inside they found her bag with her purse, her mobile, her money, her keys in. It had all of that in. Not only that, her law books were also there. She was studying really hard. She wouldn't have left anywhere without those books, so why were they in there? Why hadn't she taken them with her? Things were just not adding up. it didn't make sense to Lauren's sister either. Now, nobody really goes out without money, at least. Her keys. How would she have left her house with the house locked up if her keys were inside in her bag? It didn't make any sense. Also, generally, they are things you grab all the time. You going out, you grab your purse, you grab your phone, you grab your bag. What if you need to call someone? Your phone. It's all there. It's usually stuff you take with you. It was all set in the bag, ready to go, and so she would have just grabbed that and gone. But she didn't, because it was all still there. Now, they rang Lauren's sister back, and Lauren also, they told her about, obviously, her not being there. No sign of anything, but all these things were still there. And Lauren's sister thought that was strange too, because who wouldn't think that was strange? So, really worried, decided to call her uncle and get advice off him. He was actually a police officer in Washington, D.C. And he agreed that it was strange, and he also was worried. And he told them for Lauren's sister to ring her friends who were in the apartment, for them to don't touch anything, come out, lock up the door, and immediately call the police, which is what they did. So the police were called and Lauren was reported as a missing person. They came round and they searched the house thoroughly and they didn't find anything, just like nobody else had. They were thinking more along the lines of it being a missing persons case rather than a murder case. And as with many of these cases, when it hits the media, they turn up, they try and get footage, they want to be the first one on the story, and that's what they did. So they turned up at the scene, and the media is actually what ended up breaking this case wide open. Over the next few days, Stephen Mcdaniel gives 3 interviews. He appeared to the public as concerned and worried about this neighbour. Yes, he didn't really know her that well, but he'd spoken to her on the odd occasion and he was worried. The thing is with Stephen as well, as I said, he gave 3 interviews. He was really inserting himself into the media about this case, which is just strange for a person that he hardly knew. Yes, they were neighbours, yes, they were classmates, but he didn't know her that well. And so why was he there at the forefront of the media getting his 15 minutes of fame? This was a missing persons case, potentially even a murder case, and he was there inserting himself into the everything straight away. It was just a little weird. So on the morning of the 30th of July in 2011, the police attend the scene again. They searched around the house, and this time they bring more specialised equipment. They bring luminol, and when they spray luminol in and around the bathroom, they found blood in and around the bath. So this missing persons case went from that to a murder case. They were now looking for a body. They expanded the search outside and they realised that there was this foul smell coming from over where the bins were. Now they open the bin, they find a black bag inside, they pull out the black bag, they open that, and wrapped inside of it they find the torso of a white female. They searched more, but they couldn't find any more body parts around the area. This bin was actually waiting to be collected by the garbage people. I believe that they were actually running late on that day, and when the police had all arrived, and because of all the police cars, they couldn't get in to take this garbage, and so it was never emptied. And that is so lucky, because if it had been emptied, the police would have never known that this body was in there, and they may have never ever found it. Who knows where it would have ended up if it would have ever been discovered that she was actually murdered. This torso was assumed to be Lauren's, of course. It was literally outside her apartment, but obviously it was sent off for testing. And at this point, nobody had actually informed Lauren's family that this torso had been found. Yes, of course, it might not have been her, but she was missing. It was outside of her apartment in the bins outside the apartment block. There was no other white female known to be missing in the area, and so you would assume that they would at least update the family to let them know that this torso had been found. But they actually found out about it when their uncle came up to them and said, "Have you seen the news?" Because it was all over the news that this had been found. And that was how they found out. And that is really tragic, because imagine finding out that potentially a piece of your daughter's body has been found from the news. It was just awful. And I don't really know why they did that. Again, it might not have been her, but they still usually inform them of sort of an update in the case. And then through a DNA match using her mother's blood, they found out that yes, this was Lauren's body. So when the police begin to look into things, they see that Stephen's out there doing his 15 minutes of fame, inserting himself into the case and into the media, and they begin to look into him. They had interviewed him briefly before, but they kind of just wanted to look more into him because it's really, really strange when somebody inserts themselves into the media a lot. It happened in other cases, such as the Solheim murders, where the killer was there pleading for them to come back, and it happens a lot. And so they just wanted to look into him more. Not only that, they were going to look into the entire apartment complex, so they wanted to search everyone's apartment who lived there. They all agreed, except one person. Can you guess who that person was? Yes, it was Stephen. He came up with the excuse that he had firearms inside and he wanted to protect them along with his personal space. So everyone was taken out to the station and they were all interviewed, and they interviewed Stephen once more. They asked him if he could lift his top along with probably many other people to see whether he had any marks on his body or anything like that when he lifted up his top. It revealed 2 scratch marks on his stomach. They kind of looked like they were made by fingernails, and so when asked how they had gotten there, he claimed that he didn't know. Later on in the interview, he then comes up with that he must have done them in his sleep and scratched himself. At around 1:30 p.m, he was released from custody and they took him back to his house, where at some point during the interview he'd agreed to let them now search it. So in they went to search the house because he'd finally let them in. At this point, he'd not been informed that they had found Lauren's torso and they knew that she was deceased. Now inside, they discovered so many guns, so many knives. He even had a samurai sword in there. Whilst during the search, they asked him to step outside so that they could carry on. And guess who's outside? The media again. So what does he do? He goes over and he talks to them yet again. But the footage of it, when I watched it, I tell you what, it's just something else. Just take a look at the video.
I mean, she's as nice as can be. I mean, very personable, very much a people person.
Do you know any enemies she might have had, somebody that might want to hurt her?
No, we don't know where she is. I mean, the only thing we can think is that maybe she went out running and someone snatched her. I mean, the door was locked when everyone got here. I mean, we just don't know where she is.
So as you can see, he's just chatting to the media like he normally would. Then mid-interview, the reporter asks him about the body that they found. And well, he just craps himself.
What about in the parking lot area? I know they've been doing a lot of, I think that's where they have recovered the body or whatever they recovered from there.
Body?
Had you seen anything there? Had you seen anything there? I mean, we don't know if this is the same person. You know what I mean? Like, they took out a body there earlier. We don't know if it's the same person or not. That's how we're trying to ask people if they know who lived there.
He appeared shaken up. He didn't know what to say. He was like frozen on the spot and completely in shock.
Are you okay, sir?
I think I need to sit down.
Okay.
He had to sit down and take a time out. But then he returns to the camera to make this really, really emotional interview. You know, once the shock and how much he had crapped himself had gone away and he'd thought about it, he comes back and he is putting on the waterworks.
I don't know anyone that would want to hurt her. She was as nice a person as there is. I mean, she...
What's going on in your mind right now? Like, what are you thinking?
Why would anyone do this?
Now, I understand some people are emotional, but he didn't really know her. I'm quite a sensitive person myself. You can often get upset over people you don't even know that well because it's tragic. When someone loses a life or something like that, tragic thing happens, yes, it is sad and you can be an emotional person, but I seriously just watched this video in disbelief. Like, just give this man an award for the performance that he put on because it was just unbelievable. And guess what? The police really, really thought this was odd too. They eventually get a warrant and they take him back to the station. And they obviously record the interview. Now, this interview lasted over 2 hours long. And let me just say, it was eerie and just downright creepy and weird and odd. And I can't even express how weird I felt watching it. Throughout pretty much the entire interview, he just stares off into space blankly. He is motionless pretty much the entire time. So for 2 hours, he just sits there staring. And actually, it's pretty darn creepy. He answers every question pretty much in a monotone voice with yes, no, I don't know, I don't understand the question kind of answers. And he just kind of looks like he's possessed or something, and it's freaky.
What's wrong? You know Detective Patterson, right?
Yes.
Do you remember? Put your hands up here. You remember us talking earlier tonight, right?
Yes.
You remember me earlier in the day?
Yes.
When we came down here and talked a little bit and then we left?
Yes.
About this girl right here. You know her?
Yes.
Who is that?
Lauren Giddings.
Does she live next door to you?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know where she's at tonight?
No.
Hmm?
No.
Have you ever seen her with that dress on?
No.
It was so frustrating for the cops because in these interviews before, he was so chatty. In the previous interview on the media, he was crying his eyes out. He couldn't stop chatting about everything, and now he's shut down. He's not saying anything. Yes, no, I don't know. That's it. And they're talking to him and trying to get things out of him, and he is not playing ball. It's like he's just a shell.
Why are you shutting down? Why are you not talking to me?
I don't know.
You don't know? Are you scared?
No.
You got your ass on that fucking news and stood out there and gave a media report that her mother saw about her missing daughter. But now you're gonna get out here and you don't fucking know. You know. You're just a sorry piece of shit that don't give a fuck.
No.
It's like he's a robot, kind of, and he just doesn't give them anything. But it's a total complete turntable from what they were seeing before. They were chatting to him, he was very chatty, and now he's just nothing.
You say you don't know where Lauren is, right?
Right.
The police actually did leave the room a lot, and during that time they were just gathering
Lauren's
evidence
missing.
against him, interviewing her family and friends and things like that to try and
like you've been using
crack the
cleaner to
case
clean
even
up.
more.
See that pretty girl right there?
Yes.
You telling me you looked at a pretty girl like that and you never once thought, ever, man, she looks good. You never thought that?
I don't understand.
They got a warrant to search his car and to take the samples from the scratches on his body. One detective at one point did get him to admit to actually breaking into an apartment, and so they were able to arrest him on burglary charges. I have no idea how they got him to admit that, because seriously he was like a zombie, but they did, and that allowed them just to keep him in custody for longer, which was a really, really good thing. Trust me.
Did you hurt that girl, Stephen?
No.
Had you ever hurt anyone, Stephen?
No.
Where's that little girl, Stephen?
I don't know.
Stephen, you know. You're going to look at this right here, this little girl right here, and you're going to say you don't know? I know you know.
I don't know.
Yes, you know. What are you going to say tomorrow when I say we got your hair with the body? Why? Tell me, bud.
I didn't do it.
Yes, you did, Stephen. We want you to tell it so that way people will understand you're not a monster. Things just, you got out of control. It's a sickness. Why'd you do it, Stephen?
I didn't do it.
Stephen, why are you going to keep telling that? You hurt that girl.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did, Stephen.
It's all over anyways. We know what you did to her, so we just want to know if you were going to tell us or not.
I didn't do anything.
Well, that's what you say. But we know different, so you're fucked either way.
When they did their search on his home, they found very, very incriminating evidence
You're
against him.
fucked. We already know. We know you killed her. We know you put her body in the trash can.
Let me just say here, these things are quite disturbing, so I just want to give you a little bit of a warning before I go into them. They found things like her underwear, and this underwear had holes cut into it as if it was used as a mask, which is just beyond weird and creepy and gross. Along with that, they also found Lauren's pen drive, and on this pen drive it had all of her stuff. It had lots of photos of her. They found packaging for a recent purchase of his, which was a hacksaw. This hacksaw was actually later found by cadaver dogs in the apartment building. The dogs led them to the maintenance room of the apartment building, and that's where they found it hung up on the wall. Now, why he didn't get rid of this and just put it in there, I don't know. He obviously assumed it would never be found, but it was. It also was found to have Lauren's DNA on it. Realistically, at this point, you're thinking, how has he got into this maintenance closet to put the hacksaw in? How has he gained access to Lauren's apartment when all the doors were locked? Well, whilst they were searching his house, they found a building master key, which allowed him to get into pretty much anywhere. They also found a key to Lauren's apartment. So he had these keys and he was able to go anywhere in there, basically, just as he wanted to, which is horrible to even remotely consider. They weren't sure where he got these keys from, but he must have stolen them. They reviewed his PC and his online activity, and he was searching up things like when were the bins taken around that area. They also found videos that had been deleted from his camera that shows this creepy footage. Now, he'd actually duct tape his camera to a stick so that he could poke it around and stare right into Lauren's bedroom, I guess without being seen, and he would then record her through a bedroom window. Apparently this footage was actually taken on the night of her murder. It would come to light that Stephen had been stalking Lauren's every move. Remember when I told you Lauren thought things had moved around in her apartment and she just shrugged it off because she was busy? Well, yes, that was him. And that is just beyond creepy. To think that he was in there whenever. It could have been when she was sleeping, it could have been when she wasn't there, and he's in her house taking her stuff and moving things around, and it's just awful to even consider. They also found, when reviewing his online activity, that he had made frequent posts, and in these posts he wrote detailed stories about murdering people. He used the name SOL, which stood for Son of Liberty, and he even wrote a story to the point of where he hypothetically said about killing his sexy neighbour classmate. Around a month later, Stephen Mcdaniel was charged with the murder of Lauren Giddings. He would plead not guilty to the charges, but he hadn't actually entered a plea yet. Now, as I said in the beginning, Lauren was really against capital punishment, and so her family really pushed forward to try and get the death penalty taken off the table, because it wasn't something she would have wanted, even though this monster had killed her. It was just the kind of person that she was, and so they wanted to honour that in the daughter. Now, they did agree to it. They agreed to like a plea deal, but in it, they just basically said that they needed him to admit to everything he'd done and tell them where the rest of her body was, and that then they would pull off the death penalty. Because as of then, her head and her limbs still hadn't been found, so they wanted to find it all. On 21st April in 2012, he wrote it all in his allocution. This was actually the day before his trial was due to start, and he confessed to a murder and gave the details of what actually happened that night. He stated that on the 26th of June in 2011, he entered Lauren's apartment using the master key at around 4:30 a.m. Lauren was on the bed asleep, and he stood there watching her for a while. It was only when something that he did, I guess him walking across the floor and knocking something or something, he made a noise and it actually startled and woke her up. He was wearing a mask and gloves. She told him to get the fuck out of her apartment, and this is when he jumped on the bed and they began to fight. Somehow they ended up fighting, and they both ended up in a bundle on the floor. Now, Lauren actually ended up with the bottom half of her under the bed, so it kind of trapped her. She wasn't able to kick him or use her legs in any way to try and defend herself, and it kind of rendered her defenseless in a way. That was really sad because it really hindered her. It stopped her from fighting back and allowing her to get away from him. So he grabs Lauren by the neck and begins strangling her. At some point during the struggle, she manages to knock the mask off his face, realizing that it was Stephen under there, and she actually says to him, "Stephen, please stop." But he doesn't. He carries on and he strangles her until she's dead. He then took her lifeless body to the bathroom and put her body in the bath. And apparently then he just left. He went back to his apartment. He was on his PC. He was doing whatever, carrying on with his life like he hadn't just murdered someone. Just totally unfazed by it all, really. Obviously, he was a psychopath. When he returned, I believe the next day, he proceeded to dismember a body with the hacksaw, and then he cleaned everything up. He cleaned up any evidence he could, anything in the apartment, to say that he was ever there. He put Lauren's body in black bin bags, and I believe he dumped them in 2 dumpsters. Now, obviously, the one where a torso was found outside the apartment, and I believe he did the other one across the street, which was actually picked up by the bin men, and parts of her body have actually never been found, so it was probably taken to the tip, lost in all the garbage in a black bag. Nobody would have ever assumed anything, none the wiser, and so it was just gone. I still stand by the statement that it was really lucky that the other bin hadn't been taken yet, because who knows, maybe he would have gotten away with it if it had. Maybe they would have never found anything and never been none the wiser, and possibly he could have got away with that. Who knows? So many people believe that the planning Stephen made to actually kill Lauren, the fact that he made sure that he didn't have much contact with her and he stalked her for so long from afar, and she didn't have a clue. She didn't know anything. And then when she went missing, he inserted himself into the case, into the media, like I've said, as so many murderers do, that he had potential to become a serial killer because of how he was acting. It was really thought by the police as well that he would have continued to kill people if he hadn't actually been caught on his first kill. If that was his first kill. And yeah, it could have certainly been the case. He does exhibit that to me personally. He was obsessed with murder, and he would talk about it all the time and how he would definitely get away with it. And if he did get away with her murder, who's to say he wouldn't have done it again? He was just not right. Her murder shocked everyone, and it left everyone in the apartment complex terrified and disturbed when it all came out what had actually happened, because he was in her house and he had the keys to it all. So what's to say he wasn't in their houses too? It's just not even worth thinking about. I can't imagine how frightened Lauren was when she woke up after hearing, I don't know, a slight noise at stupid o'clock in the morning to find a man stood there wearing gloves and a mask, just stood at the end of the bed watching her. It just must have been so terrifying. Stephen went on to state that he didn't actually know why he killed her and that he must have some mental health issues. I think you've got that right, Stephen. In April 2014, he was convicted of the murder of Lauren Giddings and he was sentenced to life in prison. I do believe he appealed in 2018, stating something along the lines that his case wasn't carried out properly, that his family were behind it as well. They put up a GoFundMe page to try and claim expenses for this, and everyone was outraged, and GoFundMe promptly shut it down, which, yes, definitely. But his family backed him in saying that the police planted evidence and all this garbage, basically. And it didn't fly. The judge didn't grant him parole. This case really, really creeps me out because this man had access to her house. He was in there doing God knows what, recording God knows what, and she just had no idea. He had a key. He just let himself in when he wanted to. Yeah, okay, she noticed things were missing. She noticed things were moved around, but haven't we all done that? The amount of times that I've misplaced my phone and thought that I definitely left it somewhere, and I find it somewhere else, and I just think, I'm sure I didn't leave it there, but I must have. It's just one of them things. You would never ever assume that it was somebody in your house moving your things around. Never in a million years. And it's just really frightening. Also, I just want to say, when I looked into this case, I found it so really interesting and really, really freaky. And just the way, like that video of him when he found out about the torso and that it had been found, and he was just gobsmacked. And I just couldn't believe it watching it. He's on the TV and he just didn't know what to do, so he had to take himself away. And it was just insane. This case really, really did creep me out too. My heart goes out to poor Lauren and her family. She was just this lovely woman who was a really, really nice person, and she was committed to her career, and she wanted to give back by becoming a defense attorney, a woman who just loved life. And this deranged monster who, for no apparent reason, or at least that's what he claims anyway, murdered her and dismembered her body in, well, you know the story. Maybe it was because she refused to date him when he asked her out. Maybe it was because she was nice to him. Who knows? Either way, I'm glad he was caught before he was able to become a serial killer and murder many, many more people, because yes, it could have happened. And that he is now where he belongs, behind bars, hopefully for the rest of his life. But yeah, that's the end of the case. If you have any more suggestions, let me know and I'll look into them for you. Please give me a big thumbs up if you've enjoyed the video and subscribe to my channel for any similar content. Anyway guys, that's all I have today on the murder of Lauren Giddings. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.